Welcome to the To Be the Church podcast, where we explore what it looks like to truly be the church in today's culture. Ben's here. How you doing, Ben?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing great. You're wearing your CW hat, which is always awesome. We don't have video today. We apologize for that. So if you're watching on YouTube, you're watching like an image right now. So sorry about that. But if you were here in the room, you would see that something very exciting is happening today. There he is, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes.
And we back.
Oh.
And we back. And we back. And we back. And we back. And we back.
Andrew.
Yes.
And we
back.
back.
We back. We back.
Oh, so
This ain't no intro.
this isn't no intro. This is the entree. Oh, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing good. Yeah.
So, as listeners of this podcast know, by the many guests we've had over the last 3 months, you were on a 12-week sabbatical after celebrating a decade of ministry here at NGC.
Mm-hmm.
Decided to take some time to rest.
Yeah. It was restful.
So this whole episode is dedicated to you just telling us about the things you did and how you feel.
Okay. I did a lot of stuff, and I feel good. We just we rested, relaxed. It was a really family focused sabbatical, so we traveled a bunch and all over the place. And I did a lot of camping, a lot of relaxing. I did a lot of reading, and it was good. It was a lot of fun.
All right, so here's a question we asked you on this podcast, and we discussed it for, I think, a whole episode before you left, which is why are sabbaticals a necessary thing? Okay, so now give us your updated answer after experiencing one.
Yeah, I don't remember what my first answer was. Do you guys remember? I don't know.
You just had a glaze over your
I
eyes,
did.
a malaise.
Is that malaise gone? Is that glaze gone?
Oh yeah, you're glowing.
You're twinkling.
I'm twinkling? Oh, wow. That's wonderful. We back. So I think, having experienced that sabbatical, I definitely went into it kind of not sure what a sabbatical would be. It was like Ben, you know this, Ty, you know this, kind of in ministry for a lot of years consecutively, and you see guys take sabbaticals or whatever else, and there's a little bit of like a promised land feel to it, like, oh man, that would be amazing, before you take one. And I think the looking back on it now, the thing I actually was saying to somebody earlier this week was, I think the biggest thing about it, and this certainly was something we went into it knowing like intellectually that this would happen seemingly, but not knowing experientially what it would be like, was the routine break, the break from the routine, and I think we were talking about that on one of these sabbatical podcasts here before I took off, was that, preaching and ministry and everything involved with that is your routine. Jesus, the Bible, these things are your routine as in this vocation. And one of the hazards of that can be that they just become routine and that you lose perspective. And so I think as I look back on it, gaining perspective and breaking the routine, I think that's probably the biggest. But different sabbaticals are for different things, And this one was specifically for my family, like unquestionably, like that's what this was for, in the sense of us as a family together, kind of recovering from, 15 years of driving it pretty hard, and the age of our kids, 13, 12, 8, and 6, to be able to just really have undivided attention from me. And I think I mentioned this in staff meeting the other day, to be kind of at times just to be bored, together, and not have to always have that next thing we're driving toward. And so I think for my wife and my girls particularly, it's a different world right now than it was before, simply because I think the tanks are really full, and a ton of memories, ton of experiences that we had together that were real fun. And so, I think from like a vocational standpoint, I probably like the breaking of the routine was good. Being out of the pulpit for 13 Sundays was good. I found myself after decompressing and then resting, I did find myself kind of antsy, kind of wanting to get back, probably 2 months into it. The last month I wrestled through that and had to just discipline myself to take it day by day and not try to look forward and plan the fall or try to do any of those things. And so I think if you had a sabbatical where you split it between like a project and rest, that might be pretty good, like if you had 12 weeks and you did 6 weeks of just super rest, and then the last 6 weeks you did a project, or maybe flip that, do the project at first and then kind of rest when you're done with it or whatever. But that would be interesting. But yeah, that's certainly not what this was for. And I mean, I read like 12, 13 books and in lots of different genres of book, so yeah.
So you talked about perspective that you gained. Was that just perspective on ministry, on personal identity? Like what kind of perspective do you have coming back as you dive back into pastoring a local church
Yeah, I went into it thinking that it would be a ton of perspective on personal identity, and that may be there. I'm not sure yet. I'm still kind of working through that. The first week back here for me is like, I mean, for all of us, it's a super busy time. Ben, you're getting ready to preach a youth camp and for us, and I've got a wedding this weekend, and there's just like so many moving pieces. And so this week has been a little bit of a baptism by fire back into everything going on, but the rest of the month of August, kind of leading into the fall, is a little more normal August, where it's not going to be so rushed. And so maybe I'll be able in that sense to sort of reflect on things. But the major perspective is on my family perspective, like with, we homeschool our girls, and my wife is in the midst of all that, really doing most of that. I'm in the narrative with her on it, but being able to see my wife clearly, just to have the kind of the usual fog that just tasks and priority and all those things kind of put upon us, have that cleared away for that long of a period of time, and then being able to kind of see through her eyes, to see the girls through her eyes, and then being able to get established together in the narrative of really each one of them, where they're at, maybe discipline issues, just developmental issues. And I mean, so I think perspective on my family, perspective on my wife, perspective on my girls, on our home, on, and then probably as well, on life overall, kind of the season that we're in, and those things. But yeah, on the personal identity piece, I didn't do like a little personal retreat. I didn't, with so many things going on right now, like we're still kind of throughout the sabbatical, there was still in different places, especially earlier on, there was still COVID type stuff, and there's still things getting unweaved. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't have like, I went into it thinking, man, okay, I'll have like a sabbatical coach I meet with every other week when I'm around, or I'll do this or I'll do that. And not a lot of that stuff materialized, And so on the personal identity piece, no, I don't think I necessarily gained a lot of perspective. I still have no idea who I am, why I exist, what I'm here for, what's my name. But no,
you know how the Apostle Paul talks about all the sufferings he experienced, and then also on top of that, his anxiety for the churches. Uh-huh. Do you feel like you got a reprieve from that anxiety that we feel as pastors, or there's like that burden that is always hovering
100%,
24/7?
Totally. That and dude, you'll like this metaphor, Benji, as a weightlifter yourself. I picture like, and this kind of came to me probably a third of the way into sabbatical, maybe like 4 or 5 weeks in. This like image of like the squat rack, and you got the bar set for squatting, and there's all these plates on either side of it, and it's like with what we do for a living, we never rack it. It's always on our back. You know what I mean? And when you go on vacation, you try to, a couple weeks away or get a little respite or whatever. We try to put that bar back on the rack, and kind of step out from the rack and maybe stretch out a little bit or whatever. And we do to the, as disciplined as we grow into it. But it also feels like over a long grind in ministry over years that like the weight just gets heavier and heavier and you can't get out from under it. And so as I went into sabbatical, I had this feel of like, I'm going to get out from under this weight somehow. I don't know how. And I guess 4 or 5 weeks in, I kind of realized like, oh yeah, I don't feel that. Like that bar is off my back. Like that grind of like for you and I, the pulpit, the different, I think I texted you earlier in the week, like, man, preaching's pretty hard, like preparing sermons and stuff. And it's like, I thought before the sabbatical, I'd come back after 13 weeks out of the pulpit and I'd be just like, bleeding out all these sermons and everything else. And I just didn't think about preaching for 13 weeks. And that was the point, that I was out from under that. Also knowing at the time that sabbatical came, and dude, I would almost look back on it now and say, with our story here at Northwest Gospel, I don't think I could have taken a sabbatical till now and been able to rest like I did. Even 2 years ago, I couldn't have probably, because the way I was able to get out from under that weight and really stay out from under it was the fact that like with you guys, Tyler, Ben, all of our elders, guys like Gavin and Jeff and so many others just stepping up in this period of Nathan, like it's in good hands. The church is doing well, and I probably had more of a connection to the church through the 3 months than I would have wanted to maybe. But like my girls are all kind of school age, middle school and elementary school, and so if we're in town, they're going to be here. My parents live near us. They're driving the kids to church at those times. Chris and I are trying to go to other churches in the area at those times. And so probably half of the 3 months we were in town, half we weren't. But when we were in town, our girls are at youth ministry and those kind of things. And so that was, I was connected in there. I think in an ideal world with a sabbatical, you try to get out of town as much as possible. A buddy of mine told me that before sabbatical. And so we did. But there's always reasons that you got to stay and whatever. So yeah.
Well, you did a good job because we live, I think, 2 miles from each other, and I did not see your face for 3 months. So you were
neither did Ty.
You were hiding very well.
Yeah.
And I was looking for you every time I saw a white ram. I was like, yeah.
There's a lot of those in Shig.
It was never you though.
Yeah. That's funny. Yeah.
Yeah, so you kind of...
I didn't go on that side. I didn't golf once. Like, there's a lot of stuff that I thought, like, maybe I'll do this, and I just didn't end up doing it, and part of that too was because, like, I can remember like one day, 6 weeks, 8 weeks in, I get up in the morning, throw my shoes on, and I'm like heading out the door to like go to the grocery store to pick up some milk or something, and one or two of the girls was upstairs, like sitting in the living room. They'd just woken up, and there was like a, Daddy, where are you going? It was like this, are you going to work? Like what? You're on sabbatical still. And so it was kind of like this, there needed to be a severing of everything else in some degree to just be very present, with them. And they kind of all needed that for that period of time. What were you going to say?
Yeah. So Josh Lane preached this past Sunday, and in his intro, he talked about you coming back from sabbatical, and he told the church what not to do.
Yeah.
And he said, don't go up to Andrew and say, like, what did you learn? Mm-hmm. He's like, don't go up and be like, hey, like you went up to
just did 5 minutes ago on the podcast.
You went up to the mountaintop. Like, what's like the new vision from God for us or whatever,
sure.
Yeah. But with that caveat in mind that we're not supposed to do that, is there anything you learned about NGC in our church family while you weren't here for 3 months?
That's a good question. Wow, that's a really good question. I mean, getting back in the narrative now, like in the last couple of weeks since and this is my first official week back. I'm at the end of my first official week back, but I, we were in town the week before, the last week of July. And so I was starting to kind of get really into the narrative at that time. And yeah, I mean, the church really thrived when I was gone, and East Vancouver here really thrived. Obviously, Camus, you were there, Ben, is thriving. And I think, yeah, the church is resilient. The church is this church is really healthy. I think our leadership is really stable and healthy, and I think that's a pretty good perspective, because when you're in that I gained on that, because when you're in it all the time, and if you're me especially, like I'm always thinking about the things that need to change, the ways we need to move forward, what could be better, all this kind of stuff. And I think now I look at it and go, there's a long way to go, and there's a lot ahead up for us, but like this church is in a really, really good, healthy position. And the Lord, and this is like, I actually said this like 11 years ago almost in my first sermon here as a candidate for the pastoral role. Like this is Jesus's church, and like he's handling it. He's doing what he's going to do in his timing. And so I think that's it's cool to come back and see all the fruit, to see what's going on, and I have a role to play in that, like as a part of my job and what I'm called to do here. But what's the term? I remember years ago, this like I was preaching in a chapel at this Christian college on the East Coast, and theologically the college is not at all where I'm at today, or even was at that time. And I remember one of the deans of the school came up to me afterwards and was like, he was trying to encourage me, but he was like, "Good job. You're an important person." He said, he goes, "You're an important person. God needs you, like he needs you in his, in ministry or whatever. And it was something to that effect. Like he needs you, like he needs you on his team. He needs you to play a key role or something, And I remember just being like, huh? Like kind of just hearing it, but the, like theologically speaking, like God can and will use anybody, and I think, I don't know, maybe that's another subject for us. Does God need you, Ben? Does God need me? Like I at the time, I just thought that's the weirdest thing I've ever heard. And then over the years, God, he doesn't need me. Like, and NGC doesn't need me ultimately, and so, and this isn't like, so I resign, that's not what this is, but I really, I don't know, just the perspective of knowing how little this is dependent on me, and how what the Lord has specifically done in the men he's called to lead as elders in this church. And I mean, and Ben, you just got here a few years ago, and so you came in and saw a lot, like what was here, and what's been growing here. But I lose that forest for the trees, and especially because I'm always going, all right, we need to do this needs to change it. And so to be away from that and just go, dude, that thing is like, what the Lord's doing here is crazy. And I'm super glad to be a part of it. But it's like, it's not like on my shoulders. And so maybe we go back to the squat rack, and it's like, how much of that is just like, how much of the weight there do we put on ourselves? Do I put on myself? How much of that squatting that and just like, looking to the side of the plates that are on there and going, man, this is dependent on me. Like, do I really, like, is that metaphor really, really, I mean, again,
we could get real interesting with this metaphor, but
I'm deferring to you
is
because
the ultimate spotter. He's like, you don't got this, but I do. He's just pushing that behind you.
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, if we want to keep that metaphor going, you're probably gonna be pretty sore next week because you haven't squatted for 12 weeks, and you're gonna preach and be like, "Wow, I'm exhausted."
I actually earlier
build back up your stamina.
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday this week, like prepping and doing everything, like I kept yawning. I'm like, man, I'm super tired. It's just I'm like, wow, working's not as easy as not working, But
yeah, it'll be good to have you back. I talked to 3 different people this past Sunday or the Sunday before that have never heard you preach.
Yeah.
Like it's just like new folks that like came over the summer, and one of them didn't even know that like there was a pastor gone.
Yeah.
It was just like,
Great.
What they said to me was, it's really cool how this church has so many different people preaching all the time. And I was like, well, our pastor's on sabbatical. And they're like, oh.
They're like, never mind. I'll never see you again.
well, they like, and I couldn't figure out, like, by talking to them, who they thought the pastor was.
Okay.
Like, who they thought the actual lead pastor was.
Yeah.
I don't know. But
so we've talked in this podcast before, like funny things people say to guys after they preach. So when I preached at EV here during the sabbatical, this couple came up and they were super excited about NGC, but they hadn't met you yet. They had just come, and they were I think complimenting my preaching, but they said, yeah, the church we came from in California, our pastor was like a rock star, so this is a nice change. To me, I was like, oh, I think you mean that in a good thing, but they're like, yeah, you're just so gentle and
you are
easygoing. I was like, oh, well, my mom says I'm a rock star, whatever. But I just thought that was funny. But they were excited to meet Andrew too, and I think there's a lot of those people that came as COVID stuff kind of lifted more and more, and more people were coming. So it's gonna be a full house on Sunday. It's gonna be great.
Here we go. If you have questions for Andrew, maybe about sabbatical, maybe about anything, we would love it if you would hit us up. The place to do that is podcast@tobethechurch.com. Sorry that we're not on video this week. We will be back on video next week. But until then, keep being the church.